Emil Smith-Rowe bursting into the box, and that is a wonderful finish from Emil Smith-Rowe. It's his first goal in a Fulham shirt, certainly at Premier League level. It's the first of many, and look at the smile on his face. That's a quality goal from a quality player.
Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven Pop Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. I think I've got it right. And we're here to talk about the Aston Villa game last Saturday. So many emotions, so many feelings. I think I've calmed down enough now, ready to talk about it. And I'm joined by David Crave for what I think is an adult chat today to pull apart this difficult loss on Saturday, shall we say. Dave, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you, Pod Daddy, and I'm pleased. It's just me and you today. We'll just have to bounce off each other, but I'm sure I'll do our best. And unfortunately, we can't have Jack, Sam, or Skibby with us, but and they'll be missed, I'm sure. But we'll do our best to try and unpick what was a crazy afternoon at the cottage on Saturday.
Well, like I said, I think it's time to move the chat from the pub to perhaps, if not the fireside, maybe the restaurant for a serious meal and a proper chat. And who better to do that but than the two adults in the room, eh?
Yeah, maybe.
You don't sound convinced, David. Well, let's jump straight into it. Before we do, I must not forget the housekeeping, and to talk about the That's So Craven Discord. Please join us there if you haven't already. Really, really good, lively chat, insightful chat, great conversation. And as Jack mentioned last time, I think what I particularly like about it, great place to really simply find everything and not have to wade through the dross that is X or Twitter sometimes. So really, thank you for everyone who does participate, to our content creators. And if you haven't already done so, please join us there. And also, of course, the That's So Craven webpage where we do publish articles on a regular basis. So let's talk about the game. Obviously, 3-1 loss to Fulham after what was an unbelievably good start. Going ahead after just 5 minutes, great goal from Rao. Dave, could you believe your luck, and did you think your afternoon was going to be better than you could have imagined?
Well, I think we all predicted that we could win this game. And we were all quite positive going into it. We knew Villa had one eye on the Bologna match on Tuesday in the Champions League. We're all a little bit concerned with the disruption that might have been caused by the international break, not least the loss of Sasa Lukic. I think when the team came out, I was pleased to see he was the only kind of absentee. Without forgetting Timothy Castagna, of course, who apparently picked up a hamstring strain. So very straightforward. As we said in the last podcast, Berger came in for Lukic, and and Sessegnon and King came in on the bench to cover the various spots available. And you're right, when the game started, we got off to a pretty good start, quite high intensity, and we got a goal out. So it was interesting. It was a way we don't normally score goals like that, do we? Kind of route one. And it was
absolutely.
Some clearance by Leno, and I don't think Villa expected that, because when they'd done their research on Fulham, and we'll get onto this because they definitely had done their research on
absolutely,
but when they I don't think they'd thought about the ball over the top, because Pau Torres looked totally surprised. For a player of his quality, he looked all over the shop when that ball went over the top with Rao, and who quite easily kind of muscled him out the way, and Rao finished, and again, what's that, 4 in 5? It was a fantastic return.
Yeah,
he really is one of the form strikers in the league at the moment now, and he generally, yesterday, I thought his all-round performance was excellent, and he was very busy, really trying to link up play and getting on the end of things. I was really, really impressed with hhim. So I thought let's start on a positive note and mention that.
Heck, well, we could talk about this for quite a while if you like.
Yeah,
because it kind of goes a little downhill with, Well, and I agree, and shout out to Leno for I think it's his first assist for the season. If not, I actually can't remember when he last got an assist for Fulham. But yeah, and like you say, they absolutely had done their homework, and I don't think for a moment they were expecting us to not play out from the back. So yeah, and to be fair to Jimenez, he had quite a bit to do. He did very, very well. Ball coming over his shoulder, and he got his left foot onto it. He didn't. I thought he scuffed it a little bit. He actually hit it a little bit better than I thought he did watching it live. But he's done well there. Of course, our little moment in the sun was stolen away from us just a few minutes later. I think it was the 9th minute where Villa equalised. And tell me what you think about, what actually happened there. Obviously, he gets a filthy deflection off Bassey's thigh or calf. I can't remember which. For my money, Leno utterly had that covered. It wasn't an amazing shot. I mean, he hit it with a fair amount of power, but it wasn't an amazingly well-directed shot. And Leno was in place for me. I mean, you would have been pretty much behind that, Dave.
I would have,
yeah. But I think Leno's got that completely covered. And unfortunately, he gets a horrible deflection and goes into the net, and it's 1-1. But in the build-up play to that, I don't know if you've had the benefit of watching the highlights, but he actually drifts into too much space, Rogers, for my liking there. And what did you think about our defence and how we actually handle the build-up play there?
Well, yeah, I mean, that goal really took us by surprise because it wasn't long after we'd scored. The fans were quite buoyant. We actually, as I said before, we started the game, we were quite lively. We'd created a few kind of half chances. And you're right, it was kind of the first real opportunity Villa had. And I think you're right. I think Rogers did find a bit too much space on the edge of the box. I'm not even convinced his shot was going in, I thought that at the time and even on the highlights. So it might even be changed to a Bassey own goal, unfortunately. And just completely wrong-footed Leno. And that really kind of took the wind out of the sails of the fans, actually, who were preparing for another positive home performance, another positive home victory. And we needed to kind of react to that, didn't we, after that? And I think we did, just, I'm sure we'll come on to next.
Well, just on that, I thought it was worth actually talking about this because I feel like it's a moment where one of the first early moments where Berger doesn't do very well. He seems to be somewhat ball watching in the middle. The ball gets switched from right. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was Lukic, but the ball switched from the right-hand side over to the left of midfield. And Berger's kind of drifting across, kind of watching the play, loses his man completely, and Morgan drifts away into a surprisingly large amount of space. I mean, it all happens very quickly, but really, we've got to be better than that. And he's as a result, he's got quite a lot of time, really. Berger then reacts, tries to close him down, but really doesn't put him under a lot of pressure before he gets his shot away. And I just thought that it really wasn't great. I mean, I don't know whether it was that evident live because it all moved quite quickly.
It moved quickly. You're right. Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did. It felt like it moved really quickly. But you're right. I think it may be the first sign of how the midfield as a collective struggled on Saturday.
Yeah. And I remember saying in the build up to this game, saying that, I know Pereira's almost rusted on the 8 for better or for worse for the moment, because Marco so desperately believes that he can work there. But whether we can blame it on his lack of cohesive or chemical partners, or whether we just don't seem to be having a lot of luck in piecing a good combination together for the opposition that we come up with in central or defensive midfield. And it's becoming a bit of a problem. And I feel like we're going to be talking about this all the way through to Christmas and then into January. I really doubt we're going to sign a quality, defensive midfielder in the January window. Ain't going to happen. And so it really feels like a tricky problem that it seems highly unlikely that the personnel are going to change. So either Marco is going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat, or people are going to have to step up and play way, way, way beyond what we're seeing at the moment if we're going to plug that little hole. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that I said it all season. I think we've got an issue. I think we're missing like a real, strong number 8. Pereira's kind of filling in there, but I don't see that as being his natural position. Unfortunately, Tom Kearney's at a stage of his career where he probably can't play 90 minutes every week, and is at the tail end of his career. And Harrison Reed again, he'll do half a job in there, but he's not really got the attributes to be a consistent figure in the centre of midfield. So I do think we've got a bit of an issue in there anyway, and I think that was compounded when we lost Lukic from the 6, and Burgess come in, and that's exasperated the issues that we've seen so far this season in the middle of the park.
Yeah, interesting. After the game, a lot of people calling for Tom Kearney to be reintroduced to control the midfield and give us some quality. But the problem is that's not going to solve the issues defensively. And for the next few weeks, I think we've got a problem with Berger not having, possibly being off the pace or really not quite working there very well yet, and him not having a defensive partner as well. And I don't think Kearney is going to change that defensively, but he may just do a better job creatively in midfield than Pereira's doing.
Well, we've talked a lot about how we think the defence is, one of our strongest assets this season. And even with Andersen out for the next match, I think that, Diop coming in as a defender, Diop is a pretty decent Premier League defender overall, albeit he has a mistake in him that always seems to lead to a goal. But he's a pretty sound defender. So when you've got a capable 6 in front of that back line, which Lukic has provided so far this year, I think it's we can afford to be a little bit more expansive with other positions. Hence why Pereira has found himself alongside Lukic. Berger coming in, I don't want to be too harsh on Berger. He's still a new player and getting used to being in the team and what his role is. And he's not played in the 6 on his own because Sasa Lukic has held that position so well to date. And I think he's just going to need a little bit of time to get used to the position. My biggest concern on Saturday was that, and I mentioned this at the start, Aston Villa had clearly done their homework and identified that we will try and play the ball out through Joachim Andersen. So they put players on that side to try and prohibit him getting the ball and allowing him to, play make and start the moves. And that led to Bassi having to play the ball out. And as we saw earlier in the season before Andersen joined, it's not Bassi's greatest strength. And I think what compounded the issue is not just Bassi, a few times putting a stray passes aside that got intercepted, but we didn't really have anyone in the midfield that was comfortable of kind of collecting the ball and playing it out wide. And that's why I am an advocate for Kearney coming into the team while Andersen's out, because if Bassi is going to be the one to play make from the back, then we need midfielders that are press resistant and comfortable collecting the ball and getting it out wide so we can start our attacks. And I'm not confident in Pereira or Berger been the man to do that at this stage.
And just going back, I couldn't agree with you more there, but just going back to the problems that we had playing out from the back, it was very evident and not surprising that Villa did their homework and did it really well. And it was very, very noticeable right from the get-go. The pressure was on Leno whenever he got the ball to feet. They were on him like a shot. And not only were they on to Andersen, but all outlets, natural outlets for Andersen in close quarters were shut down as well. So he didn't have any option other than to play it to the poor old Bassi, which I thought you were being pretty generous with to him, actually, where you said it wasn't the best facet of his game. I thought he did it really badly, actually. He really cooked quite a few passes. And then... again, I'm going to be a little harsher than you on everyone here, because I thought Berger did really poorly with the ball at his feet. He looked clumsy. He didn't look comfortable at all. He looked rushed, and he struggled to make sort of clean and confident passes and actually link up play. I was disappointed, actually. I do think he's a good player, but I'm surprised he's taken quite so long to get going. I haven't given up on him. I don't think he's a rubbish signing by any means. I like what he brings. I like his size. He's pretty mobile for a big guy as well. But I'm a little bit surprised at him not really finding himself in the right positions and then struggling on the ball to actually link up. And I know that is more of a role which you traditionally expect of the 8 alongside of him. But I don't know that we can rely on such kind of separation, if you like. Everyone's got to be able to play a part in that defensive midfield. God, it's who'd have believed, from even a few months ago that we'd be lamenting Sasa Lukic being out of this side. He's clearly been a very, very effective guy in defensive midfield for us, hasn't he?
Oh, for sure. And, I think, with him being out the side, it's really emphasised how important he's been this year. And Berger's not exactly the same kind of player. He is a bit more of a kind of, he's more like Polina than Lukic is, in the sense he's more of a kind of stopper, destroyer than Lukic. Lukic is actually very nice on the ball, very tidy on the ball too, and we really missed that because, as you said, Berger wasn't offering that in the first half. I thought he was a little better in the second half, personally, and I think it's we've obviously focused on Berger now, but I've got to be honest, I was more disappointed with the other two in the centre of midfield. AP and ESR. The latter in particular in the first half. Now, don't get me wrong, we've spoken about Villa and how tactically they set up really well. Not only were they stopping the supply to Leno and Andersen to get the ball out, they'd really blocked off Adama Traore and limited his impact in the game, which was another real masterstroke from Emery. ESR was finding himself kind of a little bit lack of service, which I appreciate, but he was dropping deep to kind of collect the ball and just playing it back again, really, and little side passes, backwards passes. And I just thought to myself during that first half, don't really pay 27 million for you to drop deep and play the ball backwards. We need you to kind of get the ball out wide, get the ball forward, maybe have a run at them, turn and go, put some pressure on them. I was just really, really disappointed with his kind of lackadaisical attitude on the day. And the quality that he was offering, it was just, he wasn't impacting the game. And AP, penalty aside, it's not good enough really that to be giving away that much possession in a game of football. I think we've just seen post from Cottage Tactico with the statistics of pass completion. He ended up with 57% on Saturday, which even for Pereira, that is abysmal. That is almost half of his passes being incomplete. That's a massive part of why, we weren't able to, control the midfield on Saturday. And it's a massive part of why I think we need to, especially without Andersen next week, we're going to have to make some changes. We need some players in there that can receive the ball, evade the press and get it to our attacking players, or we're going to have real problems at the weekend. So for once this year, I think we will be talking about changes on Saturday. And I think Marco really needs to consider that.
Well, like you say, I mean, if you work through that, Tom Cairney, despite the fact that his legs are probably not going to carry him for 90 minutes in a Premier League game, he ticks all those boxes. He can receive the ball. He's as one-footed as he is. He is actually quite good in a high press situation, and he's not going to lose the ball. He's actually incredibly consistent in creatively passing the ball upfield. So, I hope Marco's listening, because I think it's not a bad shout. Even to actually start the game, see how far he goes. If we can get him to the 60th minute, if we're controlling the midfield, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough, because it could result in 1 or 2 goals.
I would be surprised if I'm going up to Everton, as you know, on Saturday. And of course, whereas I was quite positive about the game, prior to this weekend, now we're going without Andersen, without Lukic, and off the back of a defeat. And where our midfield looked a bit of a shambles. And I'm now nervous. I'm now nervous about this game. And I tell you one thing that will settle those nerves is seeing Tom Cairney on the team sheet, because we know that Bassey's going to be the guy playing the ball out. So I'd much rather see Cairney as the person to be on the end of that than any of the other midfielders that were out there on Saturday, because I just know that he'll protect it more and will then be able to cause them some problems. I don't know what you felt, Elton, and I know we're jumping around a bit, but at the back end of the game, even when we had 10 men, we ended up with a midfield of Iwobi and Cairney as a midfield too. And I was quite shocked at how much we dominated possession. I thought they were really, really good as a pair in the midfield. And despite having a man less, Villa really struggled to intercept any passes from them. We kept a tremendous amount of possession for a team that only had 10 men. And whereas Villa might have dropped off a bit at that point, settling for a 3-1 win, I think from our perspective, I think that's something that Marco would have noticed. And, if we think that Berger's more of a destroyer, could Marco on Saturday look to, incorporate Iwobi and Cairney into the centre of the park alongside him, so that we've got people that are more comfortable on the ball when we know that's not going to be the attributes our defence possesses. So, last Saturday raised a lot of questions, and I'm hoping Marco answers some of them at the weekend.
It's a good point. There's been a lot of people talking in the Discord and elsewhere, for weeks now, suggesting that, Iwobi might be very interesting centrally. And I think Marco's just hasn't really had that in his head, has he? But he didn't have a choice on the weekend but to bring him in to what's been an unusual position for Iwobi in a Fulham lineup. And I actually thought he had a very good game, actually, under the radar, but he worked really hard, and I actually thought he was very, very good.
I agree.
Yeah, back on to Emile Smith-Rowe. Look, he had a fantastic start to the season, and he's clearly a very good player. I don't think there's any question that we've blown our money here on this guy. I think he's a good player, but I just wonder whether he's the kind of player that needs some very good technical quality around him, because I just don't think he's the guy to drop deep and then actually link up play with some really good passing further upfield. I don't think he's that guy. I think he probably needs to start in a traditional well up the pitch role in the 10 position, and he needs like a Nelson or maybe even a Wilson bringing the ball in to his feet for him to break through and run at the defenders. Seems like he's more comfortable and more dangerous in those sort of positions, or even arriving in the box when we've attacked down the flanks and the ball's cut back or coming in some way. But I know what you mean. He looked really ineffective and out of sorts, and could not find his way into the game on Saturday, which was such a shame because it was definitely a big part of where we struggled in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think on that point, Elton, as well, I think, ESR has had moments of absolute brilliance this season. We've seen that he scored a couple of fantastic goals, and particularly his home performances, I say, have been really, really strong, particularly when we've been on top. And away from home, I think he's been quieter. I don't think he's had the same impact away in the games he's played, and at times he's gone a bit missing. My concern on Saturday was he looked a bit like a luxury player, and didn't want to kind of get, he didn't seem to have the will to try and change things when he got the ball, and it didn't really look like he wanted to try and make anything happen. He was just kind of, as I said, passed it backwards and sideways, and we need more from him than that. And I think he'd be another one, having lost his place at Man City a couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised again if he's taken out the side on Saturday, because we can't afford that kind of performance again. And Everton are a bit pumped up after their win on Saturday too. They're back at home. We will be up against it, and as I say, I think I'd be more confident with Iwobi and Kearney in there and giving AP and ESR a rest.
Yeah, let's talk about the
penalty.
Actually, yeah, I was going to say, actually, it was a funny old game where I think a reasonable way to describe what sort of happened is we just didn't win the big moments, or the big moments kind of went against us. Own goal, again, we're jumping around here, but, it's not like we don't know what the result was and how it all happened. But, in terms of an own goal and a missed penalty, obviously those are pretty bad outcomes, plus a terrible deflection.
Yeah.
I think I commented in our private chat that the only one moment of real quality, attacking quality, was Ollie Watkins' goal, which was a very, very good goal. But before we talk about the penalty, in as much as Raul had a really, really good game, and he was busy and very, very pumped. He's clearly very, very confident at the moment, which is great to see. What an absolute shame that I think it was around about the 20th minute, if my memory serves me correctly, where Pereira from a corner, great corner in, and he gets a head on. It looked very awkward. He seemed to be unopposed, but he got his head onto it in a very awkward sort of style. And Martinez was utterly beaten. If that was, probably 18 inches closer. Again, very unlucky. Probably should have done better. Should have at least hit the target with that, you'd think. Because there was no pressure on him. It was a very, very good ball in from Pereira. But anyway, let's talk about that penalty. Jimenez again wins the penalty, if you want to express it in that way, by heading the ball onto, I think it was Cash, who, very awkwardly has a arm out very, very wide off his body. Very, very clear penalty. I guess it was not contentious in any way that Pereira steps up to take the penalty, because we know that is he's the elected man. Talk me through the penalty. Tell me how you felt.
Oh, do I have to? Well, do you know what though? You are right to bring up the chance that Real had right before it, because I think that chance and this penalty would have put us two. If one of those had gone in, it would have put us two up, and it'd be a very different game. That's a much harder game to get back into for Aston Villa. And their confidence might have dropped at that point. So you're right to mention that as well, because it was a really good chance. The penalty, first of all, when it first happened, we saw that there was the fan. I was at the other end of the stadium, but we saw the fans in the Putney end jump up. And for them to jump up, it must have been something, it's quite a quiet stand normally, the best of times. So we knew that there must have been something happened there. And when I've now seen it back, I can't believe the ref didn't give him. It was pretty obvious that his hand, it was outstretched and right next to Raul. So God knows what the ref was looking at. But yeah, they checked it on VAR and it was a clear and obvious error. And we got the decision. What makes this controversial is we know how good a penalty taker Raul Jimenez is. I think he scored 36 out of 38 in his career, which is just unbelievable. Statistics for a penalty taker when you consider, I think only is it 80% of the penalties go in or something.
Well, I think it's less than that. I think it's less than that.
He's way above average. And we saw the controversy at the Nottingham Forest game where Raul took the penalty when he shouldn't have. It should have been Andreas, who was a designated penalty taker. And I suspect that goes back to the start of the season where there was no guarantees Raul was going to be in the team. So Pereira was going to be a fixture. So he was due to be the penalty taker. He actually had an unbeaten record at penalties up until Saturday, I believe, but off a very lower base. I think only about 4 or 5 that he'd taken previously. So he stepped up. Was the run-up I expected, because we saw him do it twice at Preston recently. And he's up against an amazing goalkeeper in Martinez. Forget that. He just read it, didn't he? And he just comfortably saved it. And when those kind of penalties, when you're trying to wrong foot the keeper and roll it in, when they go wrong, they just look horrendous. And this one really did. And it just raises the question of, after Raul did take that last one, and given the form he's in, should we have been a bit more smarter and put him on penalties? And think in hindsight, obviously the answer is yes. I wouldn't be surprised if moving forward Raul is the penalty taker now, because we can't keep Pereira on him after that. That was just not a good attempt at all. And at that point, as you say, we've missed 2 big chances to take the game. And do you remember, Elton, we talked about this last week and we said how important it was that we took our chances when we were on top. And again, it's proven that was, I guess, the catalyst for our downfall.
Yeah. Look, I think it would be really harsh and brutal to take the penalties away from Pereira at this point. If Marco's made a big point. He said it publicly. He commented on it publicly in his post-match last time when there was I wouldn't say an altercation, but there was the designated penalty taker did not take it. I know there were reasons behind it. Pereira had to leave the field of play because he got injured and he went down, and Raul probably had a quiet word and said, "Surely, mate, you've got a sore leg. Let me take it," kind of thing. Anyway, whatever. I cannot see Marco taking the ball away from me. I think that would be a brutal knock to his confidence. He's not a bad penalty taker at all, Pereira. But on paper or statistically, if it was between the two of them, I think we all know who we'd probably prefer to have as our penalty taker. And I think you make a fair point that from the beginning of the season, these things are often decided very early, and it was very far from a given that Jimenez was going to be leading the line. But I go back to, if you're up against a young and up and coming goalkeeper and you're a senior pro, God forbid, you play for the Brazilian national side, you've got some swag, and I think you can pull the mind games and get away with it. But when you're up against a keeper who's as competent and confident as Martinez, and you're capable of hitting the side netting pretty accurately with a big swinger, I don't know why you'd try the smart-ass way of tricking him into going the wrong way.
It's just his style. I mean, I've seen him do it before. He just that's the style of penalty he takes. Rao does a pretty similar thing. You know, he's not.
I know he does.
You know, but he's just a bit more savvy with it, I think. And I kind of disagree. I think if Pereira was a centre forward and and he'd missed, I think Marco would keep him on, a bit like the situation we had when Mitrovic was missing. It was will it be worse to take him off them? And is that a worse thing to do for his confidence than for it to keep him on them and give him an opportunity to retone for his error, missing whatever time he missed. But I think Pereira, when you've got someone as strong as Raul on the bench in that form and has already scored a penalty this season, given how poor that penalty was on Saturday, I think it's no option for Marco but to give Raul the nod. And I don't think there'd be too many complaints in the dressing room if he did. I think there'll be a lot of grumblings in the stands if Pereira lines up for the next one after that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I just know what Marco's like. Number one, he loves his boy. And number two, he doesn't change his mind. I think he probably thinks long and hard before he forms his opinion. And once he forms an opinion, yeah, he's pretty fixed on it. And he says, oh, we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, we go into half time with what could have been. I mean, 2-0 up at that point would have been, 2-1 up at that point we would have been. Yeah. Would have been quite incredible. Not against the run of play on the day by any means, but better than we could have hoped for sure.
Yeah, no, and after that penalty miss, Aston Villa did start to take more and more possession, and we started to see their game plan really take effect, the pressing of our backline for goal kicks, etc. And actually, they should have scored right before half time. If you remember, Rodgers flicked one just wide of the post. I can't believe it didn't go in, to be honest. It was a poor miss. That was the main chance they had, but they kind of started to take over possession of the game and control the game at that point, which was the concern going into half time. I don't know. For me, it was usually at half time, like if we're losing or if we're not playing well, I'll make a suggestion of what we should do. And I remember saying to the guys around me, the struggles that ESR and AP were having, the game was crying out for Tom Kearney. And it would be nice to see him come in and potentially Nelson too. And normally I look back on hindsight and go, what was I talking about? I got that horrendously wrong. But for once, I wish we had made those changes at that point.
Well, I'm glad you actually just said that, because I was going to say to you, should Marco have made a change at halftime? I know it's very, very unlike him. We'd have to be 4 down for him to make a change at halftime, or 5 or 6 up, before he makes a change. But given how poorly our midfield from top to bottom were functioning, you could argue that he had to make a change, and if not pull people off, really move people around. I think that's harder than it sounds to do, and you really have to change personnel. So I'm kind of with you. I think you can't just sit and hope to outplay him when it's not working. A side as good as Aston Villa, and I agree. It would have been brave, but it would have been. I think it would have been smart to make a change at halftime in the middle, but maybe he just doesn't trust Tom Kearney's fitness in as much as I'm sure he could see that Tom Kearney could have played a role, but maybe he's just thinking he's too long in the tooth.
I don't know. I suspect he just wanted to try and give the guys the a stern talking to at half time, and try and get them to buck up their ideas at the start of the half before he made any changes. As we've said, I think a change at that time would have been good, because it was clear that Aston Villa's tactics against us were having an impact and they were gaining control. I was disappointed how long he left it in the second half to make a change, because the second half started exactly the same as the first half ended, which was Aston Villa taking the game to us. And we were really struggling to kind of create anything in the second half. So to see it go past 60 minutes without that change that we were crying out for, really, really disappointing. And I'm not one to criticize Marco very often, but I do think he left it too long on Saturday to make reactionary changes that would have impacted the game.
So 15 minutes into 15 minutes into the second half, cross from Tielemans, beautiful header from Ollie Watkins.
Yeah.
And we're missing someone who can head the ball like that, aren't we? He's a very good header of the ball, Ollie Watkins.
Yes.
Again, how good! I think I made a comment in our private chat. Geez, I'd love to. I know we never really got close. We talked about it when he left Leicester, but how good is Yuri Tielemans?
Oh, he had a great game. In fact, all his corners were causing us problems. It was just sooner or later one of them was going to go in. He was just pinging them in at a real dangerous position at the front post, and Aston Villa were throwing players at it, and it felt like only a matter of time before they had some success. And just before that, Leno had made a couple of really good saves, so it wasn't like out of the blue this goal. It was coming. They just had another corner where they'd had almost scored from, and this one came in. And what he does really well, Watkins, is he's kind of the ball's behind him, and he kind of runs back, bends down, and manages to get enough power on it to get it on target. I think ESR was marking him originally, and then Berger came out to try and make the block. But I put that down to actually a really good goal by Watkins. And you can say, we should have someone attacking it, but I think it was a very, very,
very great corner, swung it, really fast swinging corner, and he got his head on a beautifully positioned goal. Leno, who actually had a great game in my view.
Yeah.
No chance whatsoever. Actually, I should also add, in terms of laments, add one more to the list. 10 minutes before that, really nice little cross coming in from Robinson. Adama climbs high into the air to make the header, pops it back across the box to Jimenez, who misses what looks like an absolute sitter. In fact, I think it might have happened just before half-time. Yet another moment where you think he could have actually kind of got one on target. It goes over the bar and hits the top netting. Another missed opportunity where I thought we could have done a lot better there. Yeah. It was just before the end of the first half, wasn't it?
It was. You're right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yep. Yeah, so at that point, Aston Villa 2-1 up. They've got the ascendancy. Things are looking pretty tough for us.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who plays the ball through to Ollie Watkins, but there's a right old scramble, and Andersen's chasing him back, and Watkins is very clever in that he accelerates, and he just actually sort of dives and gets his body in front of the defender brilliantly. And he forces Andersen to have to do something to get Watkins's body out of the way. Clear penalty for you, Dave?
Not a penalty outside the box, but
sorry, not a penalty, but a clear red card for you.
So it's funny enough. I was talking to my friend Michael after the game about this. Because in the stadium it looked really soft. It looked like a really soft. It just looked like a kind of coming together, and the ball kind of came out. And we were quite shocked at the time to see the red card come out. Having seen it back now and seen all the angles, I personally can't argue with it. I think that you mentioned it. I thought Watkins was very clever. First, he manages to get in behind Andersen, and he gets a touch of the ball that plays it across at Andersen. And as he goes to follow it, Andersen's run and arm and, just basically goes right into him and prohibits him from really being able to chase after that ball that he's just controlled and get a chance on goal. So for me, unfortunately, it's a last man professional foul, red card, 1 game ban. Others will say it's soft. Can defenders not put their arm out anymore? But I think if it hadn't have been for the fact that Watkins controls the ball and then there's the coming together, that for me says it's a red card. So I personally would be screaming for that the other way round. So I can't be the hypocrite that stands here and says that's not an unfair decision.
Oh, go on, mate. It's it's a private chat. No one's listening.
I'll call it out. I will. If I thought it was a hard done play, but
I'm going to disagree with you. I actually don't think it was a professional foul. I really don't think he was trying to take him down. I think it was a coming together in the moment. He fends him off, and I don't think Watkins is diving or going down. I think Andersen's fend off. He's a big boy. Andersen's fending off, even though it didn't look like much. It's probably carrying a fair bit of force, and I do think it's probably. I don't think Andersen's done horribly wrong there, but no. I do think that Watkins has done very, very well as a striker should. So fair play to him. And so I think it's just unfortunate that whilst I don't think it was professional. I think it's just unfortunate on a technicality. I do agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's the definition they gave the red card as a professional foul. But I kind of see from a to be accurate about it, it was a coming together, and it was just good play by Watkins and an unfortunate circumstance of events. I can't argue with the decision on hindsight, personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an unfortunate loss, and it compounds our problems. Excuse me. It compounds our problems with Lukic out at the moment. I know Andersen's only out for a week, but still. As you said, it suddenly changes things somewhat against Everton next week, where you'd think, coming off the back of the Man City performance, even away, you'd think that should be a comfortable win for Fulham next week, but I don't believe it's going to be that straightforward. So, I mean... Then Marco makes some changes, which
he did.
I do believe that he was planning to make some changes before Andersen got sent off, and then he had to shuffle the pack, obviously, and he brings Diop on, who I mean we've had good fortune with Diop coming on, and Diop has come on in the last couple of games at great moments for Fulham. Where we go to shore up at the back, and he's done a very good job defending. But I hate to kind of dump it on the guy, but geez, he has got a mistake in him, and like you say, those awkward mistakes. How often do they end up as a goal? Hey,
every time he makes a mistake, it ends up as a goal. It's just bizarre, but. I think it was a bit clumsy from him, to be honest. I think maybe Leno didn't give him a shout, and because he clearly was just about to collect the ball that was coming across, but he sticks out a leg, it hits Leno and rolls into the net, and basically our afternoon's over at that point, 3-1 down with 10 men. So, that was disappointing. It happened right after the red card as well, so we didn't even really have a chance to regroup as such. And that was the point then, I think, where we made the changes from a midfield and attacking sense and went with a 2 in midfield of Kearney and Iwobi, which on paper seems, almost crazy given the fact that they're not particularly defensive, but actually worked pretty well. and we got possession of the football for the first time in the game for a sustained period, which, and I'm only focusing on that because I know it's at the end of a game and it's a 3-1 loss and everything, but I think it gave Marco something to think about that moment, seeing how well those two played together and how much control we took of the game at that point. Because you just mentioned it, Everton at home on Saturday. If we go into that game with, the defence that we know that we're going to put out with Diop in for Andersen and the midfield that started on Saturday, which is not particularly press resistant, I just think we're going to have real problems, real problems. I just pray that, those two did enough on Saturday, Iwobi and Kenny, to show Marco that there are other options for the centre of the pitch. There are people that can control it under pressure and, drive forward, play it off out wide to the danger players. And I'm hoping out of all this, that's a plus that we can take into this weekend.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I just I can't see Marco making that level of dramatic change in the middle, but maybe needs must, and maybe he's got to do something because we simply cannot go into that game next week with that level of output from ESR and that level of kind of lack of control in defensive midfield, particularly with if we're going to be depending on Bassi to play the ball out, and all they've got to do, is crowd him, and I think we've got huge problems.
Yeah, especially with no one to target. And I know it's a great comment in the chat by David Wellington's just mentioned that Villa was setting back at this point, making it easier for Iwobi and Kearney, but. And there is, to a degree, an element of that, but it was quite noticeable that they were still trying to press them at points towards the end of the game and not having a lot of success. And really, a team of 10 men shouldn't be able to gain control of the football match in that manner. So look, I appreciate that as a caveat on this, but I still think there was enough to show that, when you've got two footballers in the middle of the park that it can make a difference. And when you've lost your ball player from the back, going into this weekend, I just think having some, even if it was just one of them in the middle to try and assist the defenders, get the ball off them and get it out wide, that's all I'm looking for. I think that would be a huge asset on Saturday.
Well, perhaps we'll leave that conversation till midweek when the pros come back and want to talk about it.
Yeah,
we wish Skibby all the best with his house move. By then, hopefully, will have rebuilt his rig, so he can actually get his microphone working by then. Maybe Jack will be fit again after his attempted restart of his cricket career on Saturday.
Cool.
And Sam will be back from couch surfing around Melbourne. But look, I think why don't we wrap it up there, Dave? And I think there's probably not much more we can say other than the fact that how things change in a couple of weeks. Coming off the back of City, whilst we didn't get a win and we didn't get any points, there was a lot to be positive about. And suddenly now we've got Lukic injured, Andersen missing a game, and the step-ins in the middle of the park ain't doing so well. Suddenly we look a little bit dishevelled, don't we?
Yeah, no, I think I don't want to make it out like this is be too negative, really. I mean, we're still in the top half of the table with 11 points after 8 games. It's still a good start. There were moments on the Saturday that were really good. We started the game well. We could have scored 3 goals in that first half quite easily against a really good side, and which shows that we've still got plenty about us that we can cause teams problems. We need to maneuver tactically on Saturday, and yes, I think Everton will be confident off the back of a win away and coming back home, but we've won there 3 times in a row up at, so we know what it takes to win up there. So I still think we should be positive going into the weekend. I just think we just need to be hopeful of a few changes and take the positives out of Saturday.
A couple of final points I'd like to make, actually. One, I thought Harry Wilson looked pretty good when he came on. He looked really sharp, which is a great sign. And maybe that's as a result of him doing very, very well in his international fixtures recently. But that is a very, very good sign that he looked very sharp, looked busy. And the other thing is, look, I thought Emery worked out Adama and kept him very, very quiet, or Lukic kept him very quiet. And I feel like we or Adama, but I think it's we need to find a plan B for Adama. And, if only to, drag everyone off to the left to create space for him and don't allow teams to actually tie him up and box him in and actually remove or hoover up that space in behind. And we have to find ways, alternate ways to keep Adama in the game, because he's just too dangerous to be boxed in. And him on the ground, not having any room to run, he's kind of a waste. At that point, I sort of do feel that you're better off having him come on as an impact sub who can just run teams off their feet later in the game. But anyway, wait and see. I don't think he played badly. I just think they did a really good job on him.
Agreed.
As they did all over the park, to be quite fair. All right, David, thanks. Let's leave it at that. Thank you very much for making the time. I was going to ask you to take me through your veterinary visit, but I think we better leave that one.
Yeah, you best not knowing about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not even going to go any further on that, but without any further ado, before we do go, let's remind people once again about the Discord. Please do come and find us on the Discord and join in the conversation. It's a really good and healthy one, and we'd love to see a few more people there. It's already a couple of hundred people chatting on a very regular basis and some really great content, but the more the merrier. All right, David, until next week and until we get together again and discuss the Everton game. Thanks for joining me, and I think that's about it. As always, come on, you Whites.